you're looking straight up from underneath the car. This is the end of the Borgeson steering gear. This is the hole where the shaft from the steering wheel comes through. It doesn't look to me, when I go from the other side and look, but I can't get a camera angle on it, it doesn't look like this is lined up with the center of that hole. And that could be a problem because there's not much, if any, movement on the Borgeson unit because those holes are drilled into the frame, and I don't think there's much give there. There may be a little, and it probably is enough because they're selling this thing. But this part right here is the foam, the carpet padding, if you will, from the inside. So that's going to go up some. And to get the steering column through, there's a lever on it that locks the steering column when you have it in park. So that's got to go through this slot right here as you're putting it in. And I think there's a plate that I haven't found yet that goes on the outside of this and sandwiches the firewall between it and the plate on the steering column. But one of the things they have you do is measure how far that steering column's got to go in there. And that steering column has to be compressed a little bit. It's a collapsible steering column for safety issues. But okay, enough about that. What holds it in is a set screw. This is another case where you have a car that's all SAE measurements, and this, I don't know if you can see it here. Let's see if we can turn some light on it. Nope, wrong button. It has a Allen wrench slot in the head. That's a 4mm Allen wrench that you need to tighten that on with. And there's a nut that once you get this tight, you screw it in on top of it and it holds it in place. That is a 13mm. So I'm going to just start this a couple threads, not enough to get it through. That didn't work well. I lost my light. So I'm hoping you can see that. I've got it started in there, but I'm not putting it in enough that it would hit the steering column. I can just feel it starting to get through. And then there's, before I lose it, there's a nut that goes on top of it to lock it in place. That is a 13mm. So try to get that started. But leave enough room so that I can tighten the set screw down on it. Now they say to measure between here and here, and then add 3/4 of an inch for engagement in the rag joint, which will give us a little bit of flex if it's not lined perfectly. But I'm going to try to get something up there to measure it and see how close we can come. So I got the steering column at, and I measured from where the plate that is going to hit right here to the end of the shaft, and it appears to be 7 1/4 inches. So I'm going to try to measure. I think it's going to be easier to measure on the bottom here, but I don't know how I'm going to be able to get that. That looks to be about 3 1/4 inches, and maybe 3 1/2. So add 3/4 of an inch to that, and you got 4 1/4 inches from the plate that hits this. The plate that hits this right here to the end of the shaft, 4 1/4 inches. So I have to shorten that shaft by about 3 inches. That's going to take most of the collapsible shaft out of the equation based on what I'm seeing. So I'll have to go and see if I can measure that up and collapse it. So I just went over and confirmed the measurement 7 1/4 on the other side, on the shaft steering column itself. I'm going to re-measure this. If you've ever done any carpentry work, you've heard the expression measure twice, cut once. I think that applies to steering columns as well. So that looks like about 3 1/4 right there. Add 3/4, I'm sorry, 3 1/2. Add 3/4, and you got 4 1/4. I'd rather make it long than short because they say it's really hard to get it back out. And I was correct in assuming that if I compress that, it's going to take most of the collapsible column out. Okay, I'm trying to get some light on the subject here so you can see that. I put some light on it, but it's still hard to see, so I'm going to point out this is the plate that goes up against the firewall from the inside. This is the bracket that is going to go from the outside of the firewall and hold it in place. It's got to go around this. That's why this one screw is just a nut and a bolt with it's a carriage bolt actually, so that there's a square hole here. But that one is going to go from the outside of the firewall through this, sandwich that thing in to the firewall, and then from here to here has to be 4 1/4 inches. And if I measure from the inside of the firewall, that's probably not going to show up exactly right, but 7 1/4. And I was trying to measure it parallel to the shaft so that I'm more accurate, but due to the camera angle, I'm sure I can't show that. But take my word for it. So the point is that that shaft has to be compressed 3 inches. 4 1/4, 7 1/4 minus 4 1/4 is 3. So that is basically up to the spline on this thing. I don't think this part below compresses, but and the other issue I may or may not have is whether the plate that goes up against the firewall will go on the shaft itself, will go through the opening that I have between the vintage air conditioning duct and the rest of the gauge cluster, etc., that's up under there. So, and I think actually this lever, the steering wheel lock is in the, I kind of misspoke before. The steering wheel lock is in there. This thing goes to the transmission so that you can't take it out of park unless the steering wheel is unlocked. So right now, and the reason I came to that conclusion is I tried to move this lever, and right now I don't have the key with me, but I can only move that a little bit. It needs to move further than that. So I'm sure that when I unlock the steering column, this will move, and that goes to the transmission to keep you from taking it out of park unless you actually have a key. So I think my next move is going to be to just see if I can get that thing in through the vintage air duct and under the steering column, or under the dashboard. I guess I should compress it some of the way before I do that. They didn't give you any tips on how to compress it, so I'm gonna double check 3 inches. From there, 3 inches is right there, right at the splines for the thing. So I think I'll compress it some, confirm that I can get it in through the vintage air ducts without disassembling some of that, and then put it in and do kind of a test fit, because the last thing I want to do is push that thing too far in. I'm pretty sure my measurements are accurate, but it would be a disaster if I pushed it in too far and can't get it back out. So I guess that's the next step, is to lower the car some so that I can put that under the dashboard and see if this will fit without taking that vintage air duct out. Okay, so on installation it says 67 to 82 column modifications using the measurement from the rag joint to the column mount. That was the 3.5 inches. Measure from the center of the mounting holes on the column to the end of the column shaft. Subtract this measurement from the one you obtained above. The one you obtained above was measure from the rag joint to the center of the hole on the steering column mount. Add 3/4 of an inch to that measurement to allow for steering shaft engagement into the rag joint. Okay, so that's that. 3 inches. I think I need to collapse it. It says you will need to gently tap the collapsible column shaft into the column, this amount. Do not collapse the shaft too far. It can be difficult to get back out. The other significant thing in these instructions is it says reinstall the modified column. Be sure to securely fasten all the original mounting bolts and hardware. Securely tighten all the set screws and then the lock nuts on the rag joint. The existing flat spot on the steering column is not intended to be used for the set screw. Use of this flat spot can cause the steering wheel to be crooked after installation. It would be necessary to file a small flat for the set screw to the seat when installing. I don't know if you need to have a flat for that set screw because it's going to engage with the ribs in the steering column, and it's going to be hard to figure out where in the heck you need to file that with that under there, and if you have it under there it's going to be difficult to file it. So I think I'm just going to get that set screw good and tight and go from there. So I'm going to start to gently tap this with a rubber mallet. I don't know that that's doing anything because that's more than a gentle tap. I'm going to take it to the next level, which is a dead blow hammer. And I'm going to not so gently tap it with a dead blow hammer. Feels like the steering column shortening, but it feels like it's the adjustable column up there, or down near the steering wheel, that's actually doing the changing. Okay, the next thing I'm going to try is I'm going to try a block of wood and a steel hammer and see if that does anything. But before I do that, I'm going to clean up that shaft a bit so that if there's anything on it, it won't prevent it from going in. So I was looking for how much room I was going to have to get the steering column in here, and it looks like it'll go. But in the process of looking for that, I was checking out the connectors I have to put on the steering column, and I saw this one little lonely black connector, if I can find it here to zoom in on it, right there. And I was like, where does that go? So with a little investigation, I noticed that right up in here, I don't know if, I gotta see if, right up in here. Make sure that that was in the frame. And I think it was. I'm gonna raise it up a little bit. There's a tab. And that is probably the ground for the entire dashboard. And if I hadn't noticed that, I probably would be okay. I've got the steering column in the car. You can see it. There's the steering wheel and there's the column. And there's a couple connectors here that need to be connected to those wires there. So instead of having me running around the car trying to zoom in, and I don't know that I can leave this steering column unsupported. So I'm going to zoom in to where the connections are going to be made and show that close up. I think that will be a decent angle. So, try to get this. So you notice I have a box there supporting the steering wheel. I'm about an inch too far with the shaft to meet the rag joint, so I have to pull the shaft out about an inch. See if I can align it and then pull it, push it through one way or the other. So I'm going to try not to turn it. Now it doesn't come out. I don't think that was quite far enough, but I'm going to try to see if I can see it. Maybe I can look down from the top if I get a step ladder here. Because I don't want to pull it back any further than I absolutely have to. And raising and lowering the lift and doing it a bit at a time is probably going to be time consuming. So let's see if I can look down from the top and see where we're at. Got a ladder here next to the lift. Should have done this when I was younger. Okay. Can't really see it from up top because the brake booster is in the way. Oh, I can feel that I'm about a quarter of an inch. I just popped it down. Almost lined up. It's about a quarter of an inch off. That lever that I need to come through the dashboard is not through, I mean the firewall is not through. I'm going to have to try and jiggle the steering column. Have to raise it up. Let's see if I can push it forward. I'm about a quarter of an inch from being lined up. hold that up higher. And my tab I didn't want to break off of the dash, or just fell off. I don't think it's a real big issue, but I'd rather seen it stay attached. The reason I don't think it's much of an issue is because it'll fit behind the dashboard, and the cover that goes below the steering column will bolt into it, and it'll just squeeze it. Still just a hair off. So close. I think I'm gonna have to go under the car and see if I can move it from there, because it's awkward from up here. I think I have a better shot at it from in there, and I can see what I'm doing. I can feel it here. But from underneath, I believe I'll be able to actually see. Turn the camera off and get the car up in the air, and if there's a way I can get a video on it, I will, but I'm not sure I can. So this is the view from underneath the car. There's where I am with the shaft and the rag joint. I'm just a tiny bit off. It could be aligned a little bit better, so I'm going to try to loosen the steering gear and see if I can pivot it just a hair. Trying to find out which wrenches I need to do that. It's a 9/16 it appears. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pivot it even if I loosen it, so. But it's worth a shot. So there's 3 bolts holding that in. I'm going to loosen those all if I can. Top one might be a little bit tough to get to, but if I get 2 of them really loose, maybe I can pivot it just a hair. That's really all I need. So I've got the 1 bolt loosened already, at least started. Let's see if I can get the second one started. I'm going to see if I can get a socket in there and have it easier. So with jiggling and prying, I finally got that through. And you can see the splines right here going into the rag joint. And the little lever is here for locking the transmission in park. It also serves another function, is you can't turn the key off unless it's in park. Okay, kind of forgot where I was on that video, but appears I've got the shaft in what I think is far enough into the rag joint. I wish I had measured that splined area to know exactly how much was splined, so I could tell if that's the 3/4 inch into the rag joint, but I think it is. And now I'm gonna try, and I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, but the bracket that holds the steering column to the firewall, I'm gonna see if I can slip that in there without getting too much in your way. I don't know. I might not be able to get it underneath the lever for the lock. Well, but I've got to get it into the bracket on the steering column. And that's just going to be a braille method. I'm going to have to put the car down and see if I can get a nut on that. Well, that's not in the right place. It's not underneath the bracket. It needs to come in a little bit to get under that bracket, I believe. It's the if I could find the hole in the bracket on the steering column on the other side, I think I could do it, but maybe not. Just a wee bit tight. I'm gonna have to push that in. In retrospect, I left that a little long as an abundance of caution for making sure that it fit, and now I'm thinking that maybe that wasn't a good idea, because I think this would have been easier with that shaft being a little shorter and getting that little lever through the firewall first, and then lining up the rag joint with the splines. If I can't push that in, which based on how easy it was going in, tapping in, I think I can. But if I can't push it in, then I'll take it out. I'll tap it in a little bit more and put it back in now that I know that it will go. So the plan to try and pull that last inch in of the compressing of the column by putting the plate on isn't going to work because the screws weren't long enough. So I had to pull the thing out, and in the process I disconnected the vintage air duct right down in here, which will make it easier to get the column back in, but getting that hose on that duct was a real chore. So I've caused myself a little bit of extra work. There's the place where it's disconnected. You can't see where it connects to because the hose is in the way, but I need to reconnect that. And I'll take you over to the steering column and show you what I found out on it too. So when I had it in there and I couldn't get it compressed all the way, I said I should have measured this splined area so that I would know how far it was, and I can tell already that it's was in all the way because the splined area is about 1 3/8 inches, and I was only showing about maybe 3/8 of an inch, so it was all the way in. Now that I know that, I am going to make it easier, I'm going to collapse it all the way that it should be collapsed. And another thing that I kind of confirmed while I was under there is that I really don't need to worry about that set screw, because by the time I collapse this and put it in all the way, there's no way it could pull out. There just isn't any room. So I'm going to put this further in, and I think I need to re-aim the camera because the column is going down. The adjustable steering part inside the car, where you can adjust how far you want it away from you. So now that that's like that, it'll make it easier to put this in, because this will not be running into the rag joint before this is through the column or the firewall. What I was fighting with was this was already engaging with the rag joint, and this wasn't through the column yet, or through the firewall yet. So I had to get this aligned at the same time I was aligning this with the firewall. So what I'll be able to do is get this all the way through, and then align the splines to the rag joint and push it in. So it should be easier to do that part of it. Unfortunately, I have caused myself some issues with the vents for the vintage air, but that's my fault, and you can learn from my mistake. So I guess it wasn't all for naught. At any rate, I don't know whether I'm going to post this as a video by itself and then the real installation, or whether I'm going to combine the two, but this may or may not be the end of the video. But thanks for watching anyway. As I always say, I show the good, the bad, and the ugly with all my videos, and this definitely isn't an ugly, but it's also not a good, so that makes it a bad, I think, because I have to do the job twice.